You're listening to Miss Style, Strength, and Grace with Deidre Murphy. This is your one-stop shop for style, fashion, health, and fitness. Deidre's passion is to help empower women to reach their fullest potential, both inside and out. Deidre and her guests will be discussing how to develop your style, health, and lifestyle hacks to energize your day and inspire you to keep reaching higher levels of success. Deidre is a professional fashion stylist, health guru, and Mrs. Washington 2017. It's time to get open and honest with Deidre.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Miss Style, Strength, and Grace. I am very eager to share my very special guest today. So Jen is actually a friend of mine, but I wanted to give a little bit of background on her and a little bit of a, bio about her. So Jen Hope is a business coach, a former health and fitness instructor, and chief bullshit slayer. Jen has a BS in marketing from Arizona State University, which she has applied to nearly 2 decades worth of marketing experience and has spent the last 10 years of her career helping scale other organizations. Jen was the VP of marketing for the company Cheeseburger. You would probably know it as the company that popularized memes. She even helped with the execution of building and selling the company Trover to Expedia. Now Jen uses her expertise and no excuses policy to help mentor and coach other entrepreneurs, those that want to up-level their life and business through actionable steps and true accountability. So a huge reason why I wanted to interview Jen is not only is she a wonderful friend and mentor of mine, but she and I have some shared life experiences, like our personal battles with depression and anxiety and how we live with those challenges every day. But she and I both realized it is now our mission to destigmatize outdated and false perceptions about mental health issues and to encourage and support others who want to push beyond barriers. So today, join Jen and I as we discuss her background and expertise in fitness and some of her moments teaching wellness programs like LesMills, her battle with depression and anxiety and how she was able to take back her life, as well as empowerment, how you can up-level both your life, both personally and professionally. So let's welcome Jen onto the podcast today.
Hello there. Good afternoon.
Hey. So like I said, I'm super excited to have you on. A lot of my listeners don't necessarily know, but Jen and I get to meet once a week. We just hold each other accountable for stuff. So I call her out on her bullshit, just say in a candid way, and she calls me out on mine, and we just make sure that we're each taking actionable steps to work towards our goals. But what's funny is Jen and I met by chance on an airplane. I was flying down to Southern California to actually meet up with my husband, who was already down there, and visit my brother. And I wasn't even supposed to be on this afternoon flight. I had missed a flight earlier that day, so I got bumped to the next flight out of Seattle to head down to Santa Ana, California. And sitting next to me is this girl, and she is Jen. But Jen, do you want to share that story a little bit of how we met on the plane?
This is such a good story. This is like the fates, the fate, serendipity of things. So we're sitting next to each other, and Deidre is wearing a pair of overalls, which to me screams like girls got style, right? And they're mother overalls, which takes it next level. When she gets up, first of all, she gets up and she's gorgeous standing next to me. Aww, and then she walks by and she's wearing these adorable overalls. And I was like, well, this girl and I are going to be friends. And so we started talking. We started talking on the plane. I asked her about her overalls because it was necessary. And I think you had fashion magazines and, just looked adorable. And so we just started talking. And over the course of the conversation, we figured out that we had both just hired a business coach. Coincidence. Oh, isn't that awesome that we're both entrepreneurs running our own businesses? I was traveling for work to go speak at a conference, and we started talking about our businesses. We figured out we hired a business coach, and it is the same coach. We hired the same business coach, and we figured out that we were going to be going to an event together. Did we know we were going to go to an event together? I think we did. I think we knew we were going to.
Figured it out by the end of the plane ride.
Yeah. Yeah, and we knew that we were going to see each other again, which was just so awesome, and it was so serendipitous, and like just the way the universe brought us together. It was meant to be, and we've been buds ever since.
Exactly. I love it. And it was just so funny because we were like, wow, we're going to see each other in like a month at our business coaching meetup. And it's funny because Jen lives in the Seattle area and I live in Eastern Washington. So to just all these things line up perfectly, and I wasn't even supposed to be on that flight, and yet I was. So I just love how the universe works in mysterious ways.
And all because I love an aisle and you got trapped in the middle seat. I mean, come on.
All because I missed my flight that morning, which I've never missed a flight in my life. So to have that happen was out of an outlier. And I was like, I've never missed a flight. But anyway, that's another story. Well, exactly.
It was my win. I win on that.
I love it. So I kind of want to go back a little bit in time and talk about your history with anxiety and depression. You know, a lot of my listeners know that that's something I've battled, and I didn't develop it until later in life, into adulthood. But let's hear your story and some of your struggles and how you've overcome that battle.
It's so interesting because I don't think I had language for what anxiety and depression looked like as a young person. I knew that I struggled with confidence. I knew that I would get shy around new people. I knew that I took things more to heart. My parents and people around me would, and still to this day, would tell you that, you know, Jen wears her heart on her sleeve. And even though it doesn't always appear so, because I can appear very confident, what's happening inside of me is a very tender person. So, you know, the anxiety and depression part was hard to get a handle on because I didn't have the language. I just knew I was really sensitive, and people could say things to me, or I could be in situations that caused me to have more emotion than the average bear. And so it wasn't until really later in life that I figured out that there was more happening there, and that there were, you know, that things like anxiety started to show up in more clear ways, where, you know, fear, things that people, you know, who are probably what I would call like more neurotypical people would experience some of those things like fear, and it would be potentially easier for them to move through them, or they'd experience something and their brain could say, hey, this is illogical, right? I don't need to be afraid of this, and be able to parse it into a place that you know, where it belonged. And for me, it just lived in like a steady state of constant thinking and ruminating, you know, some of that like typical, very depression related. I just generally think that I suck. But I didn't have a diagnosis. I just thought that that's who I was. And it wasn't until later in life. It wasn't until finding, you know, therapy in my 20s and finding, you know, doctors in holistic medicine and some of these other things, even up into my 30s, that I really was able to narrow down what I had been fighting this whole time. And it took, you know, a lot of people and a lot of support for me to be able to get to understanding, you know, anxiety, depression, and being able to find support for it.
So at what point were you able to kind of draw that line in the sand, so to speak? I know, especially for women, it can be hard to ask for help because we're like, no, I'm independent, I'm strong, I can do this on my own. At what point did you know you needed to, you know, look into holistic health and even reach out to maybe counselors or whatever?
I started counseling in my mid-20s, which was probably not soon enough. I would say, you know, the earlier I could have started would have been beneficial. But I started counseling and going to see therapists in my mid-20s. And I found being in, you know, I live in the Seattle area, and being in this area really like into my 30s was really when I found the support that I needed. So early in my 30s, I was able to really say, this is what I need. I'm kind of over this. What I'm doing so far isn't working. I'm stuck. And I was able to find multiple layers of support.
I love that. So what was the first avenue that you reached out to find support? Was it just like Googling mental health issues? Yeah. Like what?
I think I started with my insurance company. I really did. Like I just said like, okay, I have insurance, you know, I have a job that pays for my insurance, and how do I utilize that? What can I do through my insurance that's going to be covered? Being efficient, because that's, as a business person, I'm like, let's make this happen for the least cost and most ROI.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I went through my insurance company, found a provider. I interviewed a number of providers, did some interviewing with therapists and counselors and finding the right modality for me. And then I found a great therapist.
So for people like us that are all about being holistic and more preventative, what are some ways that you found to help naturally deal with this and the struggles that you go through every day?
Yeah, it's such a good question. It's such an ongoing journey, and it evolves still to this day. And I'll tell you, it's got like this windy path that kind of runs through creativity, mindfulness, yoga, the outdoors, in some combination, and then also having, and building the most incredible network of people around me who are there for support in every capacity. Those are my, if I clump them all in one basket, it is like mindfulness in every way, shape, and form, from running, walking, being outside, meditation, yoga, anything that's just going to be, clearing some of the space, clearing the clutter that lives in my mind, even for a moment, even for a second. Being able to be in my body and breathe is, it's the saving grace of my everyday.
I love that. And especially that last one that you mentioned too, like building that support network around you of people that you can reach out to, even if it's just, hey girl, I got to grab a cup of coffee with you or something later today because I got some things on my heart, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And having
or a hug. I mean, quite honestly, I have friends that, I could put my head in their lap and cry, because sometimes you need it, or hold my hand, or, just give me a hug because, you need it, that's, and so for that, I am just like eternally so grateful. Yeah.
So would those be kind of your biggest pieces of advice for somebody that, say, maybe listening and they're battling their own struggle with mental health issues? The mindfulness, getting active and finding something where you can meditate, and then finding a good support network?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I for a number of years didn't have a ton of really close friends. I had great acquaintances and great work friends, but I was in a place where I could have used a lot more intimacy and somebody in deeper relationships. And for a long time, I had one person, and that one person made a difference. Just having one person that you can call on, and tell the truth and say, hey, this is what's up. I would say now I have a couple, and like, how blessed is that? And, and it makes every bit of difference, really life-changing for me.
Absolutely. Especially in a world where we're more connected than ever, but at the same time disconnected. We have all these friends on social media. It's like, yeah, I've got 2,000 friends on Facebook, but can you actually call up one of those people and be like, hey, I need you right now at midnight? Mm-hmm. Maybe not. And I remember actually you were over on my side of the state for a presentation or a workshop here locally. And one of your questions was like, what's one of your goals? And I remember I raised my hand and I was willing to share and open up what was on my heart. And I was like, I need a good support network of friends. Because at that time in my life, I felt like I didn't have that person where I could call them up and be like, hey, I need you right now, even though it's midnight and I know you live on the other side of town, or, that person that would drop everything and be there for you. And, it was inspiring to me because at the end of the workshop, I had so many other women that were like, oh my gosh, I feel the same way. And I think we all have that in us somewhere, but we're a little too scared to be vulnerable about it.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of Brene Brown, author, speaker, TEDx speaker, amazing woman researcher that she is. She talks about like marble jar friends. And that, the friends that you have, she has a whole theory about them, but it's people who put put marbles into the jar for you. They're people who, like, if you build trust with them, that's them putting marbles into the jar. And sometimes in our relationships, we can take, marbles come out because things happen and we break trust. But it's the marble jar friends, the people who are putting effort in and putting the marbles, these positives into the jar, the people who really matter to us. And that it's normally like a very tiny handful of people. And she says that you should, that the truest marble jar friends are the people that, if you had a 1 inch by 1 inch square of paper, that you would write their names on that. Like, that's how tiny this group of people is. And also how important they are, like life or death in some cases, to have that. Because it gives, it's life-giving. For me, that's how I've managed is having this support system.
I love that. You know what's so funny is I literally just heard about the 1 by 1 theory yesterday. I was listening to a podcast, and the guest, was saying, like, yes, I have, my network, and it all sits on this little desk copy of it, and it's literally a 1 by 1 piece of paper, and I have all my important 1 by 1 people on there, and I try at least like once a day to help feed into those people, even if it's just like a voicemail or a text saying, hey, I've been thinking about you today, love you lots. And even just spending 5 to 10 minutes doing that every day for because when it's that few people on a little 1 by 1 card, it's not going to take a ton of time, but in the long run, you're going to build up those more authentic and, meaningful connections.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so funny. It's just so funny that I just heard about it yesterday.
We're connected. We know this.
Yes, I know. It's that universe again, like just spilling over into our lives. So you mentioned and you talked a lot about, yoga and meditation. So that leads me into my next ask is, how did you get involved with teaching, health and fitness classes and being a, fitness instructor, and what portion of your life was that in?
So this is probably, I'd say, like in the last 10 years. I was a group fitness instructor. I didn't know I was an athlete at all. I was a kid who didn't own tennis shoes. I wore flats for field day. Yeah, I did. I was not, like, it just wasn't my jam. I needed to, like, be fashionable. That was way more important than it was to be, like, functional.
That was me in college. I was like, I don't own sneakers. I don't need sneakers.
Yeah. So, like, 6th grade, I was wearing, like, literally, like, flats in field day. Anyway. And my mom, like, probably still won't let me live it down. But anyway, and then, like, in my early 20s, I found exercise. This is such an interesting story, but I lived in a condo complex that had a gym. And I was probably just out of college, and I was like, what is this thing all about? And I got on a treadmill. And, like, it was kind of like love at first sight, which is so crazy because now I would never run on a treadmill or try to avoid it. And I just found, I found myself, like, walking and running, and a moment, I can totally remember this moment of being on a treadmill, and it was at night, and so the building was lit up, and I was looking out the window, but I could see my own reflection, and I could see myself running, like, and it was like, oh my gosh, like, I am that person, like, who knew?
Who is that?
Yeah, where are my flats at? And so I was able to, like, take that, and I really, like, it became a part of me. And then I started running marathons. I mean, of course, that's, I'm a recovering 150%er. So that's the recovering 150%. That, like,
I'm going to be into this. Let's dive in. Let's do everything.
Yeah. So I'm going to run 26.2. And it was not quite that fast, but, that is kind of how it evolved. And then I moved to Seattle, and I joined a gym. And again, finding community, right? I found my people at the gym, and I spent a ton of time going to these classes, LesMills classes. So, if you've ever heard of Body Pump, which most people have, that's the LesMills distributorship, and they also have a Body Combat and a Body Attack and all these other classes. And I found my tribe here. I found this posse of people who were super into exercise, and I started taking classes, and I was consistently in classes. And I had an instructor, Jenna, who's a doll, and she said, you need to flip the script, and you need to get on the stage. And I was like, you are out of your mind. Like, what makes you think that, how am I ever going to? And then I did. And it was partially because I felt some responsibility. Because I could, I needed to. Because exercise was so important to me, and it had been so important in my journey, and it had become this part of who I was. I needed to do this because I was capable.
With great power comes great responsibility, right? From tell Superman, it's the Spider-Man. There we go. I was like, which movie is that from?
Right. And it's so true, and it's cheesy, but like I really did. There's some part of it that feels like a call, like you're called to do it in a way, like you're called to stand in front of a group of people and be the reason that they're taking the best care of themselves that they can and bring them healthy habits. It's so much related to what I do now. If I know that I can find my best self here, and that's something that we can all share, like I'll stand in front of the room, make a fool of myself, and have a good time. I'm worth it. We're worth it, and it's worth it. If I have to push myself so we can all, appreciate it together.
I love that. So what is it about physical movement, whether it's yoga or body attack or lifting weights? What do you think about why that is so good for the soul? Not just the physical body, but, our mental space, our soul.
I think there's something in it for me about like growth mindset versus fixed mindset, growth mindset is, essentially, I'm probably going to screw this up, but it essentially says, I can, if I'm not great at this thing right now, I can continue to try and I could get better. Fixed mindset says I suck at exercise.
So that's just like where it's going to be.
That's just it, right? I'm fixed in I don't run. I'm fixed in this isn't a thing that's meant for me. And to me, I think a lot of what I discovered in my 30s was growth mindset and figuring out that all of these things that I thought maybe weren't for me, maybe are. I learned to ride a dirt bike when I was 35 years old.
I love that.
Yeah. I learned to snowboard when I was 33. I'm still really a pretty beginner snowboarder. I'm not going to say how many years later, but I'm still a beginner snowboarder.
It's okay. I just learned to ski last year at 30, so I'm with you.
We're there, right? And there's all these things. So I think part of it is, something like yoga. In yoga, I'm learning now how to do inversions, right? That's a thing that pushes that growth mindset every single time I sit on the mat or arrive at the mat, because, I could show up with I don't go upside down, or I can show up with I might go upside down, and I might
tried it.
And I might be able to do an arm balance, and I might fall on my face, and maybe not, and maybe today I run 6.5 miles, at X pace, or maybe and maybe it's 9, or maybe I run on the trails, or maybe it's all this what if kind of mentality, and I think that's part of it for me that makes it so good for the soul, because I keep myself open to this what if, what could happen, what could I be.
I think I kind of see exercise and movement as kind of a metaphor for our lives. You keep getting stronger, and you keep thinking well, I've never done that before, so I don't know. But then you slowly over time you build up that tolerance, you get faster, you get stronger. Just the other day, that I'm training for a half marathon, and I finally hit 9 miles. If you would have told me even a year ago that I would run in one time period, 9 miles, I would have been no. My max is 3. That's all I've ever done, so that's all I could ever do, right? And I think it's about showing mind over matter and telling your body and your, both physically and mentally, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do hard things. And I think that's such a good mindset for, not just physical things, but then in business or in our life or in our finances, saying no, I'm going to do the hard things.
It's interesting too. It's one of those places where there are metrics. If you are a person who is results driven or metrics driven in some way, where it's got really tangible outcomes. And so what you can see, there's they talk about like the confidence competence loop, where like you build confidence by gaining competence in a particular area. So you have to take action, then you get competent at a thing, and then you get confident about a thing. And it's kind of a loop, right? So like you have to take action to even start the loop, then you move through competence, and then you get to confidence. And it's one of those places where it's almost constant if you're really into fitness or exercise, because you're almost kind of like, well, now what can I do? Well, now what can I do? And you're almost constantly keeping that loop going. And so, and what I've seen, what I've experienced, is that it bleeds into other areas. So like if I had a great run, I take that confidence with me and I show up in other places with that confidence. That it can start to really build on itself. And if I'm feeling like, confident in that area and fitness, I can take that with me and show up in a lot of areas very differently.
That's so true. So like in what other areas have you done that? Like have you been able to take that competence to confidence to, maybe even expertise into other aspects of your life?
Absolutely. I try and bring it into my close relationships. So if I learn new skills, if I learn something new about myself, I'm going to take, how do I continue to improve? If I want to be a great listener, I'm taking that with me into my work. I'm taking that with me into every relationship around me. I'm taking that with me into leadership. And so, yeah, it's really practicing. It's this process of like, can I do something small and then be competent at it? I mean, the reverse is even true. Like, can I not do something, right? Can I not eat sugar, as an example? I didn't have a lot of confidence in my ability or my competence in not eating sugar. But it's a practice, right? Mm-hmm. It's that same like, okay, well, I don't know if I can do this, but I can do one day and we'll see from there. And then continue to like, that loop, it's a month and it's 8 weeks and then what?
Yeah. Well, and taking it and putting it into bite-sized portions. I talk about this with a lot of my podcasts. Like, if you're new to exercise, like, don't just try to dive in all in one day and be like, oh, well, I didn't hit this and this goal today, so I'm just going to give up. Like, no, start out slowly but surely, or with your nutrition. Like, instead of thinking, I'm just going to cut everything out that's crap, like, maybe start with one thing. So maybe you're a pop drinker. Cut out the soda for a week. And then the next week, cut out the sugar or whatever it is. And just do piecemeals as little by little as you can. Yeah.
I'm working with clients. I have clients break it down even one day, because one day can be the most difficult. It's changing, your life from the way it was yesterday today. And if it's only one day, then you only have to make it through today, right? If you make it through one day and you trade out tea or iced tea today for, the soda, like just do one. Like get that one in your pocket and then go to 2, because, the 30-day plan, that seems really scary. That's all to me. I'm like, get me through, like, people talk about like the whole 30. I do like the whole 3, right, and then like go from there. Yeah. We'll see if I need ketchup back by day 5. I don't.
Like, this coffee needs something in there. I don't know what it is, but it needs something. Stevia's not cutting it.
Come on, man. Girl needs to catch up. Leave me alone.
I love it. Speaking of food, I definitely wanted to ask this question because you and I both love our yummy fats like almond butter. So what are some of your favorite paleo treats or overall yummy goodies that wouldn't necessarily wreck, somebody's health goals or even their dietary restrictions?
Oh, it's such a good question. So like full disclosure, I have given up a lot of the sugars. So it's, this is like, okay, what's really stuck around. I am a big fan of Eating Evolved. They're a paleo, they call themselves a paleo chocolate company, not a candy company. And it really is. It's coconut sugar based. It's a lot of coconut butter based products. So, and they have a keto cup too, which I think is really interesting, because it's very low carb. Obviously keto is like, 0 carb, but it's still chocolate. And so I appreciate that. And it's got enough sweetness and enough fat to really balance, not kind of doing that big, huge sugar spike and carb overload. And then I will say, people are all over the board about moderation. I will say I'm more of a fan of the moderation, because if you can get by with one peanut butter cup and it's the best peanut butter cup you've had in 6 weeks, like, go for it.
What were those ones that you gave me after Mrs. Washington 2 years ago? It wasn't even this last year. It was the year before that. And it was these like, I don't even know what they were called, but it was an amazing yumminess of almond butter in a peanut butter cup, but with almond butter. Oh, yeah. What were those?
Oh man, I'm going to have to think of it. I know they sell them. They sell them in the Seattle area at Whole Foods, and they're called like Skags or something like that.
Okay. Well, if you remember, I'll put it in the show notes so that people can find it. Definitely. But they were amazing.
They're so good. It's literally a chocolate shell with almond butter in the, like, how do you go wrong with that?
Right? Oh, that's what I do with my dark chocolate, is I just straight up dip it in the almond butter. I'm like, it's fat on fat. It's good. I mean, not so that good. Everything in moderation, true. And still, I've known how to track my macros, so I know, like, okay, this is how much almond butter I can have, or whatever. So don't just think like, oh, Deidre's saying eat the whole tub of almond butter. Okay. Like, still gotta watch those macros and everything like that. But that's a whole nother podcast. We can go down that road. I just wanted to get some of your inside tips for the yummy goodies. Or I've straight up seen you just eat the Jason's almond butter packets.
Oh yeah, that was the thing for a while.
From the like little tubey thing.
Yeah, that's like an extreme situation. But like, if you are in a dire snack state, the Justin's classic almond butter, I have one of those in my backpack. Almost always. I have one more though, actually.
Oh, yeah, I want to hear it.
The no cow protein bars are kind of my new obsession. They have new flavors, new branding. So it's called No Cow. They
like cow, like moo cow?
No, no COW. And it's really because they are not whey protein based. Mm-hmm. So I try to stay away from dairy and whey and all those. And so it's very like rice protein, pea protein based. And they have like nothing that's super scary in them. So like no soy, no gluten, no dairy, really low net carb, really high fiber. And like, they're delicious. I don't like, can a protein bar really be delicious? But
they can.
They can, right? They're trying at least. And so yeah, those are on my radar right now. The carrot cake one is like blowing my mind. So I try to eat real food, but in those emergency, dire snack situations, which I totally have frequently.
Hangry is a real thing.
Oh, scary thing for most, like, people should not be around me.
I get mean when I get hangry.
I just get silent, which is scary, which is probably more scary.
Yeah. It's funny, if you were to look at inside the bottom of my bag at any given time, I probably have a baggie of almonds and cashews, like just raw almonds and cashews. And this is even weirder, but I usually have a little can of like free range organic chicken breast in there. Cause I'm like, you never know. I might need to find a salad and throw some protein on there. So I've got a can of chicken. Like, and then when I go through the airport, they have to always check my bag because there's this giant, this glob of metal that they can't see through on the detector. And they go through my purse and they're like, oh, it's just a can of chicken. Is this yours, ma'am? I'm like, yep. Just always be prepared. And they're like, okay.
This is one of those moments where I'm going to be like, picture it didn't happen. Like, I need to see a picture of your emergency chicken can in your purse. I need to see it. I want a picture of it.
Okay, I'll post it and then I'll put it in the show notes so that other people can find it too. I'll post it on like Instagram or Facebook or something.
Hashtag emergency chicken.
You never know. Or I'll just like open the can of chicken and I just start eating it.
This is a real thing that does happen with you. I know you well enough to know that there are like emergency vegetables, emergency chicken can. Like, this is real.
This is so real. Yeah. Or the other one is Marigold bars, which you probably wouldn't eat because they are whey protein based, but it's this company out of Texas that my husband actually found. It's kind of a mom and pop situation, but they sell them online, and it's called Marigold bars, and they're paleo. There's nothing bad in there. There's usually 5 to 6 ingredients, and it's like protein. If they sweeten it, it's with either agave nectar or stevia, and they always put on the ingredients list and made with love.
So cute.
Those have been some of the better ones, and they're actually really tasty. So I highly recommend those if people are willing to have dairy in their protein. But anyway, so I did want to kind of switch gears, and we've talked about, health and fitness and some food. I wanted to talk about your career. So can you give my listeners a brief history or timeline of your career so that way they kind of know your background?
Sure. Yeah. So I started my career in marketing before there was Google. So started back in a time period where there was a website called Commission Junction, and people would trade website leads for like 3 cents. It was like, it seems so bonkers now, but this is the way of the world in the early days of the internet. And I built my career really working on whatever was cutting edge in marketing. So before there was email marketing, there was a thing called database marketing, and that's what I worked on. And then there was social media, and I worked on that in its early days when we didn't know what we were doing. And then there was Google and search engine optimization, and really just either whether I was working at an agency or working in-house for a brand or for a client or for a company, I was always working on whatever was cutting edge. And so I built this incredible skill set, and really just kept myself learning all the time. I worked in agencies, I worked in house, like I said, and then landed in Seattle and really found the startup community, and worked for a number of scaling organizations here in Seattle, leading marketing teams, building marketing disciplines, and growing these brands and growing these companies, working for such a riot of a company, a humor network, was, obviously one of the most fun jobs that anyone could have, working with clients like Friskies and, and Microsoft, and building, I think in one of the events that we had at South by Southwest, we had a cat carved out of cheese, and, things like that, like you just, is this my real life? Like, is that really my job? And then getting to work with brands like Trover. I know Trover is an app that if like Instagram and TripAdvisor had a baby, it would be Trover. And Trover, we worked and built this incredible company. And then now it was acquired by Expedia and gets to live on as a part of this, amazing travel organization. And so, really building and scaling teams, really, inspiring, infusing energy, taking this creative skill set and really analytical thinking and very results-driven personality, and working through this awesome career. It's been pretty phenomenal.
I love it. And I do want to familiarize my audience with that company, Cheeseburger. So I remember hearing about this company when I first got an iPhone, and we would all start to message each other the little funny memes. At the time, we didn't know they were called memes, of like the cats. And it would be like the cat that's like, "Can I has cheeseburger?" Or, yeah. Just like the funny thing. So that company is the Cheeseburger brand, and that's what Jen worked for, and she was their VP of marketing. So she's kind of a big deal.
I tell people a lot that like the cat meme thing, and then videos of like dudes jumping off buildings and things, like that's what we were responsible for. And a lot of times
so you're responsible for the downfall of our society, essentially.
And I say, like, you are welcome, and I am so sorry. Like, it's really all in one breath. Like, we're all really glad, and also like I'm sincerely sorry.
Like, that was my bad. I sold that to the masses.
That was us. My bad.
Whoops. So what made you want to leave the corporate world and pursue coaching and entrepreneurship to help others, small businesses?
I worked for, obviously quite a long time in marketing, and but I started my education studying psychology, being the human that I am, and having had the human experience that I've had, has always made me really interested in how people work. I'll also add in like some weird layer here about being a Sagittarius, and how that makes me like really introspective and really connected to my own feelings. That's kind of how I interpret the world. And I don't really know if that means I'm like has anything to do with signs, but it's just how I see it. And it makes me really be able to look at others and see how they interpret. And there was a period where I was doing a lot of branding for companies. I was helping the companies I was working for and doing consulting as well, helping companies understand who they are, their essence, their values, their, essentially what makes them unique. And it was like a light bulb went off. And it was like, oh, this is what it is for humans too. This work of like going inside, looking at our own data, looking at what's important to us, being able to articulate our strengths, our opportunities, all of these same things are really applicable to humans. Mm-hmm. And it's like a light bulb went off. And I was like, oh, this is the cross section. This is where, studying psychology and being a human who's so aware of, the human experience, and then having this background in marketing and this data and this results drivenness, this like worlds came together, and it just started to make sense to me that there was a path forward where these two things live together, and understanding essence for humans and being able to support them and understanding who they are, and helping them build confidence and helping them make change, and still getting to be like along the ride in the business aspect, along for the ride with them in their careers and making great change. It all just made sense.
Mm. Well, that kind of leads me to my next question about, you talked about finding their uniqueness. So you, as a coach, Jen Hope, what makes you unique? I mean, there's such a saturation, I feel like, in the world of business coaches. So what makes working with Jen Hope unique?
What I hear from people the most is two things. Like, it's an energy thing, which is so hard to quantify, but it is, right? Like, you're like, how does that make a difference? But it's an energy thing where I'm able to like infuse energy into another person's experience, where I take all of this energy that, this sensitive, amped up human is, and also cares so much that people feel like they have, this like infusion of energy to really move things to another level, because somebody really cares. The other thing I would say is that there's compassion building, and there's a way in which I'm able to hear some of what's unsaid and be able to reflect some of that back. And I hear over and over again, like, you see me, you get me, and you're able to really have compassion for me and help me build compassion for myself.
To be really insightful and being able to be perceptive to what maybe somebody isn't saying.
I think so. I think that's part of it. I think the other part, the experience I've had as a business person is also, it adds this unique layer, because there's the support side and there's the like being a human side, and then there's, because I try to bring all of myself and be as authentic as I can, there's, being a human being who has anxiety and depression. For some people, that's really important because they know that I understand their experience. For others, it's being somebody who is a marketer or a business professional or somebody who's really driven by their career, which clearly I have been, and I continue to be. Being an entrepreneur is like the ultimate step into being driven by business. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's the combination of those things. I also hear that there's a level of authenticity because I'm willing to say the things that somebody else might not say in front of a room full of people. Drop an F-bomb or call myself the bullshit slayer. That it makes it like accessible. Like I'm not going to be over here and have all the answers. I don't want to have all the answers. I want you, my clients, to have all the answers, and I really empower them to do that.
And it helps too, from what I see when I see you, speak or give a talk. You're just up there and you're laying it all out and you're sharing your heart. And I think that really resonates with people, especially in a world where we're inundated with fakeness. And I think it just shows that real side of you, and people connect with that.
Yeah. Oh, it's real. Like,
shit's getting real, guys.
It is. It's true. I think, well, last time I spoke, or about a year ago when I spoke, I was talking about like being really nervous and how when you get really nervous, you have to pee. And I was like, am I on stage talking about this? Like, who is this person? Yeah, like, talking about nervous pee with a microphone? Like, what are you doing? But it's real, and it's like in my head, out my mouth sometimes, and I know people will understand it, so, here we are.
So why are there, or in your opinion, why would somebody that's maybe still driven and very motivated still need a business coach?
I think we get in our own way, and we make up story. That's what I hear most often from people. Somebody who wants to take themselves to the next level can still be someone who's got an opportunity to talk some things out and to get more perspective. I mean, the reality is, in my mind, two brains are better than one, and having a support system is never going to be harmful.
Yeah.
Having another person in the boat with you to get some perspective, from what I've seen, is always it's always best.
Yeah.
It's always a support. It's always a comfort. And I hear from people sometimes they don't need it, or they don't want to need help. And it can be really challenging to say, like, I do need help, or want it, not even need, but like, I would like to have somebody supporting me. And so, it's giving us a little bit of perspective that, we can get caught up, we can get in our own way, we come up with, our brain is like its own thing. It does whatever it wants, right?
Yeah.
That's why meditation.
It's designed to protect us, and so sometimes that means, drop everything and run. Like, I think that's what the word fear, people use that as an acronym, like forget everything and run, and that comes down to that fear factor of like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do or how I'm supposed to do it, so I'm just going to give up on it. And I think even as motivated people, especially, somebody like you or your other clients, it still helps them stay accountable and realize, like, from an outside objective perspective, like, you can do this. Let's break it down into actionable steps, and then you can start to work on each one of those individually.
Yeah, I think part of my whole motto has been like saying yes. There are still a zillion things I'm afraid to start and I'm not saying yes to, right? Like, there are places where, I am still intimidated, and we are intimidated. That's part of life. We are still supposed to be afraid, and fear is definitely there to serve us. And so there are places where having somebody like a coach to kind of like link arms a little bit and be like, hey, let's go into that dark room together. We'll shine the light together. It's not as scary if there's another person in here. We could talk it out, work it through, and come out the other side. Like, dope.
Well, and speaking of the yes that you talk about, you actually gave a talk. I don't remember where it was, but it was all about how you started to say yes and how it completely changed your life. So let's talk about that for a minute. In what areas do you challenge people to start saying yes, and what does that look like versus when do you say no?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And what do you say yes to, and when do you, and what do you say no to? Saying yes, it took on a little bit of a life of its own at one point, where saying yes was really about making small change and being brave and not letting fear, run the roost. And it was about, doing things that were outside of my comfort zone. And so it started with 30 days. I said yes to everything for 30 days. But it started from a place of feeling pretty stuck. I was depressed. I wasn't feeling great. And I really wanted to make change, and I wasn't sure how. And so it started with, one day. It started with, I'm going to say yes to things that are uncomfortable for one day. And in that first day, I quit smoking. I like, what? Like, just for one day, because that's all I knew that I was capable of, is doing one day. And I gave up sugar and, just started saying yes to things that were new and that were different. And this is also where saying no, right? It was just as important to say yes. I was saying yes to myself and to my health and all of these other things. And I was saying no to these things that weren't serving me. I was saying no at the time, I didn't have the support system that I have now. I was saying no at that point to loneliness, right? I was saying yes to these things that I needed and wanted, and to changing my life. And so it really is starting to parse out like this yes and this no. What do I need to do for myself? Like, currently I could share a yes to myself is I'm missing a part of, reading, right? That's a habit that, that I come and go from frequently. And so now it's about saying yes to reading because it fuels me and it fills me up and it gives me fulfillment and it inspires me. So there's some of that, what does that mean? That means I'm saying no to Netflix, which is like really easy, right? that's sugary candy. You just throw that down your gullet. And so
where did the last 5 hours go? Oh, exactly. I just binge watched an entire season of who knows.
Exactly. And so it's some of those switches, right? It's that we got to start saying no. Another one, I'm really focused on creating more white space in my life. So saying yes to white space means saying no to jam packing my calendar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's very different, right? You can you free yourself with those two words.
I love that. And I recently heard a different podcast where the girl that leads the podcast was saying that this is her year of no, and it wasn't supposed to be like, I'm just gonna say no to everything, but being very intentional and mindful of the things that she says yes to. If it is a session with coffee with a friend, is that gonna be that person that she really does want to pour into, or is it more of that acquaintance where she's like, you know what, I really don't want to develop that relationship? Am I just saying yes for the sake of saying yes and guilt, or am I saying this as a yes because I know it's going to fuel both of our lives and feed into both of us? So I love that.
Absolutely.
So we do have to start kind of wrapping up here, but as we do that, there's a few questions that I always love to ask all of my guests. So my first one is, do you have any resources that you're currently, speaking of binge watching, that you're currently binging on, whether it's a podcast or a book or what have you?
Yeah, sure. I am obsessed with the Tony Robbins podcast right now. I'm listening to it a lot. I know you love Tony too. So, and so Tony Robbins podcast for sure. A little bit a little bit more obscure down the mindfulness path is 10% Happier. It's a podcast about mindfulness and meditation. Dan Harris is the host of it, and he is a former news anchor who has changed his whole life to be focused on mindfulness and meditation. And so it's all it's professionals and I don't want to call them gurus, but people who are leading the industry in mindfulness, and even some celebrities and that come through that he speaks with about mindfulness and the impacts that it has on their lives. And I never fail to be a little bit lighter, a little bit brighter, a little bit more affirmed in why I continue to cultivate this practice than when I listen to it, because I can see these pieces of what people are talking about in their mindfulness and how they're less reactive and more present to life. So that one I'm totally obsessed with, and it's kind of a little bit off the beaten path.
I'll have to check that one out. I've been loving, obviously, Tony Robbins, and then I've been binging on Tim Ferriss, the Tim Ferriss podcast.
Oh, yeah. Tim
awesome.
was on 10% Happier and talked about his experience at like a 10-day silent meditation. So check it out. It's pretty good.
I'll have to listen to that one.
He's such a riot. I love that guy.
Yeah, I like him too. And I found him from another podcast. So it's just funny how I start going down this rabbit hole, and then iTunes is like, oh, you might like this one. Oh, you might like that one.
That I do. Thank you, iTunes.
Right? Yes, thank you. My next question is, what are your top 3 core values that dictate all your decisions?
Really connection, number one. I mean, obviously that's shown up in a lot of what we talked about today. I would say health is the other. And those two are probably tied for, number one. And then really authenticity is under that. So, showing up as much as I can in an authentic way, as, bringing all of these pieces of myself and being willing to share what's happening here and, what I'm thinking and feeling and being authentic.
I love that. What's funny is I just recorded a podcast this morning about authenticity. So you'll have to check that one out when it drops.
All right. Can't wait.
Love it. So this one is kind of open to interpretation, and I ask all my guests this one, but what does it mean to do things with style and grace to Jen?
I mean, style is how you show up as you, right? It doesn't that isn't even about combat boots or a tattoo or athleisure, but it can be, right? And then grace for me is about how you interact with other people and how you interact with yourself. So grace to me is, can I handle how imperfect I am and sometimes annoying it is to just be in this body? I mean, legit, right? And if I'm annoyed, if I'm this annoyed with me, I can only imagine how everyone else is feeling.
Oh gosh.
And, you know, and then also like maybe everyone's a little bit less annoyed. And then also like interacting with other people and knowing that, you know, this concept that like we're doing the best that we can. I'm doing the very best that I can. You're doing the very best that you can be. We may need to do better. We probably do need to do better. But like in this moment, like that generous assumption of like, okay, we are all doing the very best we can right now. So, you know, style is like whatever funky way that I'm going to show up that day, however that is. And being willing to express it, like whatever that is, I'm rolling with it. And then, you know, really that like kind of generous assumption of like, we're all doing the very best we can for grace.
It's kind of having grace with yourself.
Yeah,
love that.
For sure. It makes it easier to have grace for other people. If I'm giving myself the credit of like, even if this is, you know, an S show right now, like we can say that, right? S show. Sure. That I'm still doing the very best I can. And, you know, that gives me the compassion to be able to handle what everyone else is doing. That same compassion.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I love that.
Yeah.
So where can my listeners find you? Not just like your house address, don't give that away, but social media, website, whatever.
I am at Hey Jen Hope, HeyJenHope, all the places. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Find me there. My website is heyjenhope.com.
Check it out because she just launched her new website and it looks stunning and beautiful. So
yeah, there's videos there, blogs there. Thank you.
Yes, she's always giving out tons of little mindfulness nuggets and little videos both on social media and on her website. So be sure to check those out for some of her inspiring little giveaways.
Yeah, let's do that.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today, and I appreciate you.
I just adore you. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
I love it. Well, thanks. And for my listeners, if you enjoyed this podcast, take a screenshot on your phone and tag me on your Instagram story and share it there. And I might just feature you in my Instagram story as well. So thank you for listening.
Hey ladies, thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. To help empower more women, please be a doll and rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. For show notes and other free resources we mentioned today, go to stylebydeidre.com.